Hey everyone and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video I'm going to be talking through all the books that I read in May. I wasn't sure if I should actually do a wrap up for May because all of the books that I read last month I've already talked about in other videos like reading vlogs, or I did a dedicated review for one of the books that I read. But I know what I'm like because I knew that if I didn't do a wrap up then I would be really annoyed at myself, because I've done a wrap up every single month since I started my channel. So here we are. I don't think this video is going to be very long because I've already talked about these books before, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. So in total I read 9 books in May, and 6 of those books were for Eurovisionathon, which was a readathon that was hosted by Helen from Helen's Bookhaven, and then 2 of the books I read for DoTheThingAthon, which was a readathon hosted by Ashley from A Frolic Through Fiction, and then the final book that I read was Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which I think is out now. It came out last week and I read an advanced copy because I had an ARC through NetGalley and I really enjoyed that book, so I decided to do a dedicated review on my channel. So I'll leave a link to that video in the description as well if you would like to check it out if you're interested in that book. Obviously if you're not interested in that book then you probably won't want to check it out, but I feel like I'm rambling. I feel like this video is not going great so far. This is why I decided to switch to doing my vlog style wrap-ups, because sometimes in these videos I ramble a lot and they're a nightmare to edit and they take me hours to film. But I didn't want to do a vlog style wrap-up last month because I was vlogging for the readathons that I was taking part in for the whole month, so I didn't think that it would make sense to do 2 vlogs alongside each other when I would basically be talking about the same books. And this is what I mean by rambling. I'm going to shut up, and I think I'm going to start by talking about the first book that I gave 5 stars this month, which was A Man Called Uwe by Fredrik Backman. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I don't know whether it's Uwe or Uwe, but this was a great book. It's literary fiction about a man called Uwe, surprisingly, who comes across as very grumpy, and he lives quite a solitary life. But throughout the book you learn more about his life and about his past, and you see that there's a lot more to him than he first appears. This is the second book that I've read by Fredrik Backman and I absolutely loved it. I think that Fredrik Backman has the potential to become a new favourite author for me. I love the way that he writes communities, and especially the way that he writes these characters that feel very real, and I love seeing the way that he creates the dynamics between the characters and how he builds out their relationships. This book made me cry, and so I would recommend it if you like emotional, contemporary or literary fiction. The second book that I rated 5 stars this month was All the Lonely People by Gayle, and this is very similar to A Man Called Uwe in the sense that the plots are along the same lines and have similar themes, but they're not identical, and the characters and the character stories are very different. So this follows a man called Hubert who is, I think, 84 years old, and every week he talks to his daughter on the phone. His daughter lives in Australia and they chat every week about what he's been up to, and he tells her that he has this very active social life when in reality he's very lonely, but he doesn't want her to worry about him. And so they've been like this for a couple of years, and then she suddenly announces that she's planning to come and visit in 4 months. So he finds himself in this situation where he has to make friends because he doesn't want his daughter to come over and find that not only has he been lying to her, but also that he is completely alone. He doesn't want her to feel like she has to move home to look after him. You also follow a separate timeline in the past where you find out more about Hubert's life and how he moved to the UK from Jamaica in the 1950s. This book really surprised me because I had a feeling that I would like it, but I didn't think that I would love it as much as I did. It was so heartbreaking in places, but also really heartwarming, and I love books like that are sad but that are also heartwarming. I really want to read more of Gayle's books, so if you have any recommendations then please let me know in the comments. I read Half a World Away last year and really enjoyed that too. It made me cry, just like this book made me cry. So if you're looking for more sad book recommendations, then apparently I have a thing about sad books, but I would recommend this one too. The other 4 books that I read for Eurovisionathon were Lullaby by Leïla Slimani, which is a literary suspense about a nanny who murders 2 children in her care. I really liked the narration on the audiobook for this, but I wish it had been a little bit longer, so I gave it 3 stars overall. I also read Snowblind by Ragnar Jónasson, which is the first book in an Icelandic crime thriller series. I really liked the isolated setting in this, and I would like to continue the series. I gave it 4 stars overall. It kind of reminded me of an Agatha Christie book, even though I've never read anything by Agatha Christie. The vibes that I got from this book felt like how I would imagine an Agatha Christie book would feel. Next I read Dear Child by Romy Hausmann, and this is about a woman who escapes from a man who's been holding her captive in a shack in these woods. Her description matches a woman who went missing many years ago, but throughout the book you're trying to work out, is she who she says she is? Really liked the tension in this, and I gave it 4 stars. Finally, I read The Shadow of the Wind by Ruiz Zafón, which is a historical mystery that's set in Barcelona, and it follows a boy who is trying to learn why someone is burning all of the books that are written by this author. So he finds a book in a library that really captures his attention, and as he learns more about this author, that's when he discovers that there's this mystery surrounding the author. I struggled to get into this in the beginning, and the writing style didn't quite work for me, but I did enjoy the second half, and so I gave it 3 stars overall. As I mentioned earlier, this month I also read Malibu Rising by Jenkins Reid, which a buddy read this with Vish from Books with V, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm really glad that I enjoyed it because it was one of my most anticipated books for the year, and so I'm glad that it lived up to the hype that I built up in my head. I will say that I didn't enjoy this as much as Evelyn Hugo, but what I love about Jenkins Reid is the way that she writes characters, and the characters always feel so real, and so you can't help but feel invested in them. I also really loved the atmosphere in this book and how it made me feel like I was in Malibu in the 1980s, even though I've never been to Malibu and I wasn't even born in the 1980s, but the vibes were there. It also made me want to learn how to surf because it's set by the beach, and so in that sense I think it would be a perfect book to read over the summer because it definitely gave me that warm weather feeling. I gave it 4 stars overall because the only little criticism that I had was that I felt like the ending was a little anticlimactic. Next we have the 2 books that I read for DoTheThingAthon, and the first book that I finished for that readathon was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V. Schwab. I actually started listening to the audiobook for this last month, or I started listening to the audiobook at the end of April because it's available on Scribd, but then I took a break for 2 weeks because I had an ear infection, and so I couldn't listen to audiobooks that much because I couldn't use headphones, but I did enjoy this book overall. I think most people know what it's about. So it follows a girl called Addie LaRue who makes a deal to live forever, but the consequence of that is that she can never be remembered. And so you follow 2 timelines. You follow Addie in the past and you see her life, and then you also see her in the present day. So she's been alive for about 300 years, and in 2014, I think the present day timeline is set, she meets someone in a bookstore that does remember her. I didn't love the beginning of this book, and I found it really difficult to get into because the story does mostly focus on Addie. It is her story, and I didn't feel like I cared about her enough to be interested in just reading about her, and it started to feel very repetitive. However, once she meets this person that does remember her, I found that I was a lot more interested, and I found that whole storyline really interesting. I also did like the narration on the audiobook. I thought the narrator did a really good job of creating this atmosphere, and I felt like they did a good job of bringing the different emotions, because this book does get quite emotional in places, and different types of emotions as well. Like there are some parts where the characters are very sad, but then there's also some parts where certain characters get quite angry and frustrated, and I thought that the balance was done really well. The ending wasn't quite what I was expecting, and that's what I found with this book, is that sometimes I would think that I predicted something that was going to happen, and then I would only be half right. And so the ending did surprise me. I gave it 4 stars overall, maybe 3.5. I think that the narration on the audiobook definitely bumped it up half a star, and I would recommend it. I think I'm glad that I finally got around to reading it, because this is one of those books where when it came out last year, I saw everyone reading it, and I was really excited because I liked the whole concept behind the plot. And I think that if you're in a similar situation where you're not sure whether it's worth reading because of the hype, I would say give it a go if you like slow-paced books and if you are interested in the plot. The final book I read this month was The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This is an adult epic high fantasy series that's a military fantasy, I think would be the best way to describe it, and certain events within the book are also inspired by actual Chinese history, which I think is really important to know going into the book. The story follows a girl called Rin, who is a war orphan, and she lives with her guardians in this village where they don't treat her very well, and they're trying to marry her off to a man that is 3 times her age, which Rin obviously doesn't want, and so she convinces them to let her take this exam, and if she passes this exam then it will get her into her country's most prestigious military academy. And the only reason they agree is because no one expects her to actually pass this exam, but she does. You find out at the very end of the first chapter that she has got into this school. And so in the first half you follow Rin as she moves to this military academy and she starts her training, but then the second half takes a very different turn and there's more of a focus on war. I gave this book 4 stars overall. I did really enjoy it, and I found that I enjoyed it more as the book went on. The main issue that I had was with the timeline, and I don't know whether pacing would be the right way to describe it, but I felt like there were certain parts that were skimmed over too quickly and it ended up feeling a little jarring in places. However, I did think that the final third of the book was really well written, and like I said earlier, I would recommend checking the trigger warnings for this book because there were certain parts and one chapter in particular that was really difficult to read. But I have already started the second book in this series, and it's been a while since I finished a book in a series and I've wanted to immediately go into the next book, so I'm planning to read that in June. Really looking forward to seeing how the book continues, because I think if this book carries on in the same way that the end of book 1 did, then it has the potential to be a 5 stars. But yeah, those are the 9 books that I read in May. Like I said at the start of this video, I didn't want to spend too much time talking about them because I've already talked about them in previous videos and I didn't want to feel like I was repeating myself, but hopefully you still enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of the books that I've talked about in this wrap up, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it and click subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you next time. Bye!